Hey everyone, welcome back. Well, we get one day above freezing, about 39 degrees out here, and then it's right back into the deep freeze for the rest of February. So we're out enjoying our one day. And there's nothing I like better than putting snow on these trees. So this is one of the trees from the early January videos. They're all doing really well. Nothing waters them like a good slow snow melt on them. And we are getting a pretty good melt today. So we'll go in the shop and I'll show you the other ones. So these three trees are doing really well. I think most of my Yamadori trees do well because of the compost I'm using. It comes from a plant not far from here, and they're composting all the same trees: tamarack, spruce, and pine. So it has just the right nutrients for these trees. And this planting's doing really nice. The giant sequoias are all happy in here. I'm not letting them freeze. I'm keeping them inside. I've already gotten some snow on that one. So it's about that time of year that I need to start making pots for the market. So I'm trying to make a lot of them that are about the size of these two. And I'll give you a little tip. This is the template that I made one on a couple of days ago, but I came in 2 inches from the end and made a cardboard template and cut these corners because it's extremely hard to make a good 45 with the concrete on these pots. These two pots I was able to do it, but it gets really frustrating. And I do like this shape with the corners cut off. So I made one a couple days ago. It's been soaking in this tub. It's really good to keep them underwater. So it makes a nice shape with the corners cut off. So yesterday I made this round pot, and I've got this pot all videoed, the making of it. So we'll take a look at that, and then we'll get this one turned over because it's ready to turn over. All right, the first thing to do on these pots is to make the sand for the inside of the pot. So I always want to put a little more sand on there than I need. And I'll use my little plywood jig to give me the parameters of the sand. It really works for me moving this jig back and forth. It's important that this sand is not too wet. If you start with sand that's too wet, it'll mess up your mix. The the Portland is always thirsty for water, and it can suck the water right out of the sand. So if you're planning on making your pot right after you do the sand, you need to make sure there's not a whole lot of water in it. It doesn't take much for it to stick together. And the more you work with it, the more you figure out the right level of moisture in it. But you just don't want it too wet, because it can cause a big problem when you go to put the concrete on there. So I always do a lot of packing of the sand with the trowel, just to make sure that it's all stuck together really well, because you don't want it falling off when you go to put concrete around it. So I always use this motion of throwing the concrete down on the bat. And this part's a lot like icing a cake. You're just trying to get an even amount of concrete on there. And from this point on, it's a constant battle to not have any concrete hanging out over the template. So I take the back of the trowel and get rid of all that concrete that's hanging out over the template. Because I always rely on a template to make these pots true. So now working on the bottom of the pot, shooting for about a 1-inch thick bottom. Once I start troweling it, the top of the trowel will give me that line on the top of the pot and tell me the right level for it. So I always want a little bit more than I need on there at this point. So there, we've just about got the whole cake iced. So with concrete, there's a lot of things that affect it. It's really fairly cold right now, and it has a big effect on slowing the concrete down from setting up. And in a cold situation, sometimes you have to let the concrete sit for a while, and I ended up in that situation. You can see that it just wasn't quite ready to stick together with the trowel. So if it does that on you, you just need to take the trowel and push it all back together. And you might need to wait a little while. Eventually I do take a break here from it and let it set up for about 30 minutes. But I like to go ahead and get most of the material on there, so it's exposed to air. So even though it's not quite working right, it's still the process of making the pot, and it's just a matter of taking the trowel and pushing it back on itself, because all concrete has a time when it acts right with a trowel. So I'm realizing about now that I'm going to have to let this one sit for a little while. So I'm just going to go ahead and put the rest of the concrete around the top of it, so I can leave it for about 30 minutes and let it all set up. So this is about 30 minutes later, so just in that short amount of time it changes quite a bit and starts to act a lot better with the trowel. It just starts to stick together better. So you just have to really pay attention to what's happening with the trowel, and if it needs to sit, you just need to take a break from it. And when it's cold, you have a lot of work time with the concrete. If you're making this somewhere where it's really warm, then it's going to be completely different. It'll set up much faster. But in a cold climate, I usually have to let it sit for a while. So you can see that the trowel's giving me that line on the top of it. So I'll remove everything that's above that line. Try to get it nice and flat on the top. And then it's just a matter of troweling it till I'm satisfied with it before I put a drainage hole in it and put feet on it. So keeping the trowel nice and wet at this point is really important, and just working it until I'm happy with it. So I always use a piece of 1-inch copper, and it works really well. And it's a really good idea to put quite a few turns on it when it's in there, because the copper is troweling the inside of the hole as you turn it. So then it's time to put some feet on it. So this is how I've always done my feet. They've worked really well for me. I use a little sheet metal trowel to corral the concrete into a basic round shape. And this is a round bat that I know is nice and flat. And this puts all the feet on the same plane. So I'm not relying on the top of the pot to be exactly flat. Even if the feet come out a little bit different size, I'll still have a flat plane on there, and it won't teeter on a table. And it's just worked out really well. So flattening them out like that makes them a little bit bigger than I want them. So I usually go back and cut the corners off on them. Get them down to the size that I want. And then this is a little trowel that I made. It's just a piece of sheet metal. It's screwed to a piece of wood for a handle, so I can trowel the edge of the feet. So I'll go around on all the sides of the feet and this is when I want to make sure that there's no air gaps on the feet. And using this trowel on them makes a little slurry at the bottom of them that sticks them to the pot really well. And after that, a wet sponge. I like to use these round sponges and cut them in half. And the concrete reacts really well with a wet sponge. And I'll use it all along the feet to ensure that they're stuck to the bottom really well. Just adding a little water and troweling right there is what closes up those gaps. So this is just a regular 1/4-inch drill bit, and while the concrete's wet, it's very easy to drill in. So I just use it by hand and drill some holes in it for wire holes. And this is also a good time to get my initials in it. So I usually use an old framing nail for this. You might be hearing a little wind in the background. We've had a cold front move in. It's back to freezing. All right, it has been 24 hours and I'm ready to turn this one over. This one shouldn't be much of a struggle. So this one did stick fairly well. You might see some people putting oil on here to get these things to release, but I really have more trouble with them, with the pot sliding off of this. So I'm kind of happy when it sticks on there, because all it takes is a good knock with a piece of wood to break that seal. So this template is one that I cut out of birch plywood, and it's 1 foot across. So this pot is one foot across. So for this part, when it's sticking up that much, the trowel takes it off really nice. Now I can use a sandpaper to put a little radius on it, because they do come out pretty sharp right there. So as usual, it's time to get the sand out. All right, got all the sand out, and you can see on the drainage hole, I've got one little spot there where it's torn out. So I've mixed up some sifted sand and Portland, and I can start by just fixing that little spot. Just use my finger to make it round there. And then you can see the cracks around the sides of it. And I want to get those all filled up because I don't want water freezing in those cracks. Is the main reason for this. It does make them look a lot nicer, but the main thing is that I don't want water freezing in those little cracks. It's a pretty big place right here. This will fill right in, fill it up. It's a really important step on them to make them look good. Yeah, that's all there is to it. So in about a week or so, I'll make a video and we'll put something good in this pot. I hope everyone's having a great bonsai day, and I'll see you next time on Bonsai by the Sea.